Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. I started working nights because I didn't trust silence anymore. That was the honest answer, anyway. The version I gave people was simpler, better. I said I liked the extra pay. I said I was a night person. I said the quiet suited me. What I did not say was that I had just left a man who turned every room into a place I had to apologize for. A man who never hit me, which somehow made it harder to explain. He had used words instead. Exact words. Surgical words. He knew how to make me shrink without touching me. By the end, I could not tell whether I was scared of him or the version of myself he had spent 2 years manufacturing. So I moved to a smaller apartment on the edge of the city. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a view of a brick building that reflected nothing back. I worked at a grocery store on the late shift, stocking shelves after midnight, sweeping wet footprints near the entrance, listening to the refrigerator compressors hum like distant machinery in a ship's hull. Rain was constant that season. It tapped the front windows and turned the parking lot into a smear of neon reflections. Blue from the pharmacy sign, red from the traffic light, white from passing cars that never stayed long. The store had one oddity everyone joked about and no one wanted to own. Aisle 9. It was the grocery aisle with breakfast cereal on one side and canned soup on the other. Nothing strange in daylight. But on the night shift, every few nights, I would see the same customer wandering it in the same pattern. Middle-aged, tall, dark coat, hands in his pockets. He never bought much. 1 bottle of water, sometimes gum, once a loaf of bread, but he always walked the same route, from the end cap with the pasta sauce to the frozen waffles, past the canned beans, stop, turn, go back 3 steps, pause in front of the soup, then the cereal, then he would return to the beginning and do it again. Not browsing, not lost, measured, like he was counting something only he could hear. The first time I noticed him, I was front-facing the dairy cooler while a soft jazz station played through the store speakers. Some old instrumental thing with a tired saxophone in it. The kind of music that made the fluorescent lights feel almost kind. He looked up at me from the aisle and gave a small nod, as if we had already met. I looked down at the inventory sheet and told myself I was overthinking it. But after closing, I checked the security footage because I could not get the feeling out of my chest. The aisle was empty. Not just empty of him, empty of everyone. No movement, no cart, no shadow passing the end of the row. Just the camera angle, the long fluorescent hum, and my own reflection in the glass of the freezer doors. I rewound it 3 times. Nothing. I told myself the camera had glitched. The old store system was bad. The image stuttered if someone slammed a freezer door too hard. That had to be it. I wanted to believe it. Then he came back the next night. Same coat, same pace, same route through aisle 9. Except this time, when I looked toward the aisle, he was already watching me. Not smiling, not threatening, just attentive. There is a particular kind of attention that feels worse than anger. It feels rehearsed. It feels practiced. It feels personal before it has earned the right to be. He reached for a box of instant oatmeal, held it for a second, then put it back. I watched his mouth move as if he were counting under his breath. When he passed me at the end of the aisle, he said quietly, "You always face the labels outward." I blinked. "What?" He nodded at the cereal shelves. "You turn them when you're anxious. The corners line up better when you're trying to feel in control." I actually laughed once. A short, disbelieving breath. "Do I know you?" "I don't think so," he said, but his voice stayed with me after he left. Low, calm, the kind of voice that made people lean in before they realized they had moved. I checked the footage again after closing. Aisle 9. Empty. The entire night. No one. For the next week, he returned every other night. Same route. Same pause points. Same invisible presence on camera. I started timing it. 1:42 a.m. on Monday. 1:39 on Wednesday. 1:41 on Friday. I told my coworker Jules about it during a break in the back room while the vending machine hummed and the ice maker cracked inside the wall. She frowned. Could be a camera blind spot. It's not just the camera. He knows things. Jules sipped her coffee. Like what? I hesitated. That was the problem. The things he knew were small enough to sound stupid out loud. That I preferred black coffee on nights when I couldn't sleep. That I kept my keys in the left pocket of my jacket. That I had once used an old nickname in a password reset email at work because I was tired and lonely and not thinking. That I used to hum the same song every time I stocked bread because it matched the rhythm of my hands. Maybe he works here, she said. No, maybe he knows you from somewhere. I had no answer for that. I went home after my shift and locked the door twice. My apartment was quiet in that unnerving way. The refrigerator hummed. Pipes clicked inside the walls. Somewhere downstairs, a television murmured through thin plaster. I made toast I did not finish. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then it buzzed. Unknown number. You look tired tonight. I sat very still. Another buzz. You should sleep on your right side. Your shoulder hurts less that way. Asterisk asterisk. My hand went cold around the phone. I called the number. It rang once and went dead. Blocked. I tried to tell myself it was a scam. A wrong number. A recycled text from somebody else. But the next morning, there was a message on a dating app one had barely used in weeks. The profile had no photo. Just a blank gray silhouette and the name, Eli. Asterisk, I know you don't trust easily. That's okay. Asterisk. My stomach tightened. Asterisk, you fold your receipts before throwing them away. You say it's because you hate clutter, but really it's because you like things neat when the inside isn't. Asterisk. I sat on the edge of my bed and read the message for times. There are moments when fear doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives as clarity. Suddenly, every ordinary thing in the room looks arranged by someone else. The window, the hallway noise, the shadow under the dresser. I deleted the app. Then the email started. One from a new address, no subject line. Just a link to a photo. It was a picture of me leaving the store, taken from across the street in the rain. My hair pulled back, my coat half zipped, my face turned down against the weather. Below it, one line. You always look like you're apologizing to the night. I had no idea how he got my email. I blocked one account and 3 more appeared. A voice note came through from a burner number. It sounded like me. Not exactly me. A close copy. Same breath. Same pauses. Same flat exhaustion in the middle of the sentence. Asterisk, I'm fine. I'm just tired. Don't worry about me. Asterisk. I didn't remember recording it. I searched online in a panic, checking my own accounts, looking for signs of intrusion. My email had been accessed from a device I didn't recognize. My social media had followed and unfollowed strangers I'd never heard of. One account had liked photos from 3 years earlier. Another had posted nothing at all, but had a profile picture of aisle 9 from the store, taken from the end of the row. The next night at work, I saw him at the far end of the aisle. Same coat, except this time he was not alone. A woman stood beside him, staring at the cereal labels. A little older than me. Blank face. Not frightened. Not aware enough to be frightened. He leaned toward her and said something I couldn't hear. She smiled in the way people smile when someone seems kind. Then he looked at me and smiled too. I dropped the box of crackers in my hand. When I went to the aisle, they were gone. Not walked away. Gone. The end cap was empty. The shopping cart was gone. Even the overhead light seemed too bright, too innocent. Jules told me I needed sleep. I said maybe. I told myself I was stressed. Maybe I was overthinking. Then I met Mara. She came in around 1 a.m. every Thursday with a paper cup from the cafe across the street. She had a quiet face and a voice that never rose above the noise of the refrigerators. She asked me where the almond milk was, and when I showed her, she said, "You look like someone who doesn't get enough of a break." It was such a normal sentence that I almost cried. After that, she started coming in more often, not in a way that felt aggressive, just enough to seem natural. She worked early shifts at the clinic 3 blocks over. She liked the same jazz station I left playing when I stocked shelves. She noticed when my hands shook from too much coffee and slid me a packet of sugar without asking. "You always leave here looking like you're bracing for bad news," she said one night near the register. I gave a tired smile. "That obvious? Only if you've lived through it." There was no flirtation in it. That was why I trusted her. I told her small things at first. The breakup, the move, the apartment that felt too quiet, the way I kept hearing footsteps in the hallway outside my door and assuming they were mine. She listened with an expression so steady it almost felt safe. Then, one night, she said, "You used to be called Annie." I stopped breathing. No one here knew that. Not even Jules. Mara looked at me, and her face did not change. "I'm sorry," I said. "How do you know that?" She tilted her head slightly. "You used to sign your old email that way. When you were 16. You liked the name because it sounded less visible." I had never told anyone that. Not ever. I wanted to believe there was a harmless explanation, a mutual connection, a public record, a family friend, some coincidence that would collapse if I pulled at it hard enough. But my body had already answered before my mind did. My skin had gone tight with warning. That night I checked my apartment door 3 times. The deadbolt was fine. The chain too. Still, I slept with the light on. At 3:12 a.m., my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Unknown number. A single photo. My living room. Taken from the hallway. The edge of my couch. The lamp I never turned on anymore. The dish towel over the kitchen chair. Someone had been outside my door. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and went into the hallway. The corridor smelled faintly of wet concrete and old carpet. Every apartment door was closed. Silent. No television. No footsteps. Just the low mechanical hum of the building's water heater. At the end of the hall, something white was tucked under my door. I walked toward it so slowly it felt like I was moving through thick water. It was an envelope. Inside was a printed sheet of paper and a receipt from my store. The receipt was mine. The timestamp was from a week ago. On the back, in neat handwriting, "You should stop asking cameras to tell you what you already know. They only show what people want seen. Asterisk, asterisk." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I called the police. They took it seriously only after I showed them the message archive, the voice clone, the account activity, the repeated visits at the store, the photographs, the hidden access to my email. One officer finally looked up from the evidence sheet and asked, "Do you know anyone named Mara?" My throat tightened. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, fake profiles, messages sent to 3 other women, all night shift workers, all in different parts of the city. The same tone, the same calm attention, the same invasive detail. Mara wasn't Mara. She was his construction, a name he used when he wanted access without alarm. The man from the aisle had a real name too, though it hardly mattered by then. He was a former security contractor who had worked with the store's camera vendor. He knew blind spots. He knew how to loop feeds. He knew the hours women left work alone and the exact kind of loneliness that made a person easier to enter. He had been watching for months, maybe longer. The police found a spare key to my apartment in a drawer of his temporary room across town. They found a binder full of receipts, routines, screenshots, maps of my commute, and notes about my habits written in careful, patient handwriting. Not random obsession. A campaign. A process. He had built a version of me from fragments and then used that version to reach me. The woman from the cafe. The voice notes. The blank profile. Even the timing of the messages. All of it designed to make me feel known before I felt threatened. That was the worst part. How gently it had been done. How much of me had leaned toward it before I knew better. They arrested him 2 days later in a parking lot behind a pharmacy. He did not run. He did not shout. When they put him in the cruiser, he looked at me through the rain and gave the smallest nod, as if we were still in the aisle together. I did not sleep for 3 nights after that. Not really. I kept the lights on in my apartment and listened to the refrigerator hum, and the pipes click, and the rain tapped the glass like a patient hand. Every sound felt edited now. Every shadow had a history. I quit the store a week later. Jules hugged me at the door and did not ask for details. I was grateful for that. I moved again before the month ended. New apartment, new locks, new route to work, new coffee shop, new names for my passwords. I changed what I could. It helped less than I wanted and more than I expected. Some nights I still wake up and listen for footsteps in the hall. Some nights I still hear the soft buzz of a phone and feel my stomach drop before I remember I am alone. I wish I could say fear ended when he was arrested. It did not. It simply changed shape. It became caution. It became a habit. It became the habit of checking the lock before I trust a room, of looking twice at a face that seems too familiar, of understanding that being seen can feel like kindness right up until it becomes possession. Aisle 9 was repainted after I left. I heard that from Jules months later. New signs, new layout, different lights. But the strange thing about being followed is that it teaches you a difficult truth. People do not have to be in front of you to reach you. They can learn your shape from the spaces you leave behind. And privacy is not just about locked doors. It is about the right to remain unread. Story 2. By the time I noticed the missing orders, I had already stopped sleeping properly. That was what the breakup did to me. It did not destroy me in one clean event. It hollowed me out. Slowly. My apartment became a place where sounds felt too loud and silence felt heavier than sound. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen like an exhausted animal. Rain tapped the bedroom window at night. My phone buzzed sometimes with dating app notifications I did not open. Some nights I would lie awake staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the building settle, thinking about how a person can leave your life and still occupy the same amount of space inside your chest. I took the late shift at a diner on the edge of town because I needed the money and because I thought motion might help. Cold city streets, wet neon, cars hissing through intersections. A place open all night, full of steam and grease and tired people who did not ask questions. I was the cashier. That is where it started. Not with blood, not with a scream, with complaints, wrong burgers, missing sides, fries instead of mashed potatoes, black coffee when the receipt said tea, a woman in a green coat insisting she had ordered pie with no cinnamon, even though the kitchen ticket clearly showed the modification, a truck driver swearing he had paid for a burger combo that never arrived. The strange thing was that every receipt matched the order perfectly. Every time. I checked them myself. The printer spat out the slips in a steady mechanical rhythm, paper curling warm in my hands. The black text was always neat and exact. No missing items, no substitutions, no mistakes. And yet the customers were never satisfied. They looked confused first, then angry, then embarrassed, like they were being told they had imagined their own hunger. Maybe the kitchen is screwing up, my manager said the first night. He was a thin man with a soft voice and tired eyes. He called me by my name in a way that made it sound like he was trying to reassure me. His name was Calvin. He had that kind of calm that makes you lean toward it. He seemed to understand when I got quiet. He noticed when my hands shook from too much coffee. He brought me a tea on rainy nights without asking. Once, when I was standing at the register staring blankly at the receipt printer, he said, "You look like you haven't been sleeping." I laughed too quickly. "That obvious?" He shrugged. "You keep rubbing your thumb over your ring finger." I froze. I had not worn a ring in 2 years. It was a small thing, probably nothing. Still, I felt the first thin thread of unease pull tight in my stomach. That night, after closing, I found a receipt on the floor behind the counter. No one had ordered food. No one had been at the register. It was folded into a narrow strip and damp around the edges, like it had been carried in from the rain. I opened it under the fluorescent lights. Table 6, soup, toast, no substitutions. Below that, in the same clean printer font, "Not for the living." I stared at it until the buzzing lights seemed to blur. Then I laughed once, because my mind wanted a way out of itself. I told myself it was a prank, a sick joke, Maybe one of the cooks was messing with me. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I was overthinking. The next morning I asked the kitchen staff. No one admitted anything. One of the line cooks, a guy named Rafi, looked genuinely uneasy when I showed him the receipt. "That wasn't me," he said. "And I don't joke about stuff like that." He said it too quickly. Then he looked toward the back hallway, where the storage room door stood half open in the dim strip of kitchen light. I followed his gaze. The door was closed when I looked back. By the third night, the missing order complaints had become routine. Same pattern, same confusion, same correct receipts. A man in a gray jacket claimed his burger had no onions, though the slip said extra onions removed. A college girl said her noodles came with the wrong sauce. An elderly woman with wet hair and trembling hands insisted her sandwich was completely wrong. And then, when I offered to remake it, she stared at me with such exhausted fear that I nearly sat down beside her. The order was right, I said automatically, because that was what the ticket said. She shook her head. No, it was right for someone else. That line stayed with me. Right for someone else. After she left, I checked the table numbers from the tickets against the booth cameras. The footage showed each customer exactly as expected. The food came out. The customers took it. They argued anyway. Nothing obvious. Nothing impossible. Except when I paused one clip and zoomed in on a receipt in the woman's hand. The bottom of the slip had been smudged by grease. Underneath the printed item list, there was a second line. Too faint to notice at first. MS 04:13A M. My initials. I jerked back from the screen so hard my chair scraped the floor. No one had placed that order in front of me. No one had spoken to me. Yet my own initials were there, hidden beneath the print like something buried and waiting. I took the receipt home. My apartment was silent except for the refrigerator and the rain. I laid the slip on the kitchen table under the yellow light and stared at it for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice note. I almost deleted it. Instead I pressed play. Static. Breath. Then a man's voice, low and careful, speaking as if he were standing close enough to be trusted. "You still checked the wrong drawer first," he said. I went cold. The note continued. "When you're anxious, you count the cups on the shelf. For blue, 2 white, 1 cracked handle in the back." I looked at the dish rack. For blue mugs, 2 white, 1 cracked handle in the back. My mouth went dry. The recording ended. I sat in the dark kitchen with my phone in my hand and listened to the building hum around me. Floorboards creaked somewhere above. A pipe clicked in the wall. My breathing sounded loud and strange, like it belonged to someone else. I wanted to believe it was a scam, a coincidence, a hacked contact list, something explainable. But the next day, Calvin was waiting for me before my shift. He handed me a coffee. "You look like hell." "Thanks." He smiled faintly, then lowered his voice. "Did you get the message?" I stared at him. "What message?" The smile faded. Not fear, recognition, like he had expected that answer. He leaned one elbow on the counter and glanced toward the dining room, where only 2 customers sat under the buzz of the overhead lights. "You should be careful," he said quietly. "The wrong order gets passed along." "What does that mean?" His eyes lifted to mine. They were calm. Tired. Too calm. "You've never been the first person to notice," he said. Then he walked away. For the first time since I got hired, I paid attention to the regulars. That was when I saw it. Some people came in once, complained about the wrong order, and never returned. Others came in again and again, always ordering the same thing, always leaving with a strange, distracted look, like they had been told something private. And every missing order belonged to someone who had a name in town history. The local paper archive was full of them once I started looking. Teen boy vanished after a late-night shift at the marina. Woman from the flower market, never found after a winter storm. A mechanic who walked out of a bar and did not make it home. A waitress who left her car at the diner and disappeared before dawn. People who had not simply gone missing. People the town had stopped talking about. I spent one entire day on my break in the back booth with my laptop open, searching old news scans and social media pages. Rain streaked the front windows. The espresso machine hissed. Somewhere in the kitchen, a knife rattled against metal. I found a list of missing persons from the last 12 years. 11 of them had once been regular customers. 11 of them had ordered food from our diner. 11 of them had receipts in the system. All of them had food that never matched what actually reached the table. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then I noticed something else. Every one of those names had been entered by the same cashier initials. MS. Mine. I shut the laptop and stood up too fast, knocking my knee into the table. When I turned, Calvin was standing behind me. I had not heard him approach. He looked at the laptop, then at me. "You found it." My throat tightened. "What is this?" He hesitated, and for one awful second I thought he might finally tell me I was insane. Instead he said, "There's a room under the floor." I waited for the joke. It never came. "There's always been a room under the floor," he said. "Not in the building plans, not on the city records, but it's there." The dining room noise seemed to dull around us. The hiss of the fryer, the clink of silverware, the soft jazz from the ceiling speaker. Everything felt far away. "Who's in it?" I whispered. He looked exhausted then. Not guilty, not shocked, just tired in a way that made him look older. "Some people who weren't meant to leave town," he said. I stared at him. He added, "And some who weren't meant to arrive." That night I checked the floor behind the counter. There was a section near the walk-in freezer where the tiles sounded different under my shoes. Hollow. I knelt there with my flashlight and listened to my own breathing. The hum of the freezer. The drip of something behind the wall. I found a seam in the tile. Then a metal ring. I pulled. The hatch lifted with a wet, reluctant sound. Cold air rose from beneath the floor. Not mold. Not rot. Something older. Something trapped. I nearly dropped the flashlight when I saw the steps. Concrete. Narrow. Leading down into blackness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number again. This time it was a video. I opened it with shaking fingers. The camera was pointed at me. From inside the floor. I could see myself standing above the hatch, pale and stunned, framed by the yellow light of the kitchen. Behind me, Calvin was visible in the reflection of the stainless steel prep table. He was speaking to someone off camera. Then the image shifted. A face appeared in the dark behind the camera. Not a monster. A man. Thin. Middle-aged. Familiar in the way some nightmares are familiar. He smiled at the lens and said, in a voice almost gentle, "The order is correct. You just keep sending it to the wrong table." I dropped the phone. When the police arrived, it took them less than an hour to break through the hidden space under the diner. What they found made the town look smaller. There was a narrow room under the floor lined with old banquettes, broken chairs, and stacks of archived receipts. Boxes of personal effects, wallets, bracelets, a set of keys with a hotel tag, a cracked phone with no battery, scratched plates, serving trays, and on the far wall, pinned in neat rows, were printed orders going back years, each one marked with a name, each one linked to a missing person. The man in the video was not some supernatural force. He was a former owner's son, a local who had stayed after the diner changed hands. He had built a system beneath the restaurant, used the confusion of late-night service, the gaps in memory, the routine of shift work. Fake orders, mismatched tickets, misrouted meals, small disappearances hidden inside ordinary noise. He had been using the diner as a machine for erasure. Calvin knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough. Enough to stay. Enough to help. Enough to keep the whole thing quiet, because people in town had done what people do when something terrible becomes part of the local rhythm. They learned to step around it. There were victims still alive when they were found. Not many. One of them had been below the floor for 8 years. The aftermath was all lights and questions and tape over the doors. Reporters outside in the rain. Flashbulbs. Police in wet jackets. My name in a statement I barely remembered giving. Calvin was arrested. So was the man from the video. More charges followed. The town began correcting itself in public, which is another way of saying it started pretending it had never known. I left the diner 3 days later. I did not take my apron. I did not take the leftover tips from the drawer. I took only my coat and the receipt with my initials on it. The final slip had been found beneath the floorboards, tucked into a plastic sleeve with the others. Someone had written on the back in the same neat printer font, "Table for one, under the floor, no substitutions." I keep thinking about that phrase. Not because it was dramatic, because it was precise. The worst lies are not the loud ones. They are the organized ones. The lies that come with timestamps and receipts. The lies that look like routine until you understand they were designed to make absence feel normal. Sometimes I still dream of the restaurant after closing. The hum of the fridge, the neon light on wet pavement, the sound of a ticket printer spitting out a perfect order. And I understand now that the terrifying part was never the missing food. It was the way everyone in town had learned to accept the wrongness as long as it arrived neatly itemized. Because privacy can be stolen, identity can be misrouted, and if enough people agree to call a disappearance ordinary, then even truth can be served cold under fluorescent light, with the receipt folded neatly on top. Story 3. The first time I heard the second sound, I was standing alone behind the lobby counter at 1:13 in the morning, staring at the ice machine like it had done something personal to me. The hotel was half asleep. The front doors were locked. Rain tapped the windows in a soft, steady pattern that made the whole building feel submerged. Outside, the streetlight smeared into the wet glass in a pale orange blur. Inside, the air smelled like old carpet, lemon cleaner, and the metallic cold of the machine humming in the hall. I had only been there 3 weeks. I had moved to this city after the breakup because I could not stand the apartment anymore. The silence had become too intelligent. It knew my name. It knew the shape of my grief. My ex had not been loud when he was cruel. That was the worst of it. He had taught me how to doubt my own reactions without ever raising his voice. So when I took the overnight shift at the hotel, I told myself I was starting over. The ice machine sat just off the lobby corridor, past the elevator and the vending machine that never worked properly. It rattled and clanked in the dark like a tired appliance. Normal, mechanical, comfortingly dull. Then, under the clatter, I heard something else. A second sound. Soft, thin, almost speech. I stepped closer and looked through the small slot where the ice came out. The machine was shaking a little, dropping cubes into the bin with a wet, brittle hiss. And beneath that, I heard my name. Not clearly, not enough to understand the sentence, just enough to make my skin tighten. I stood there listening. The machine rattled again. The whisper came again. I told myself it was the pipes, the vents, some trick of the building settling in the rain. Maybe the air conditioning was pulling sound through the walls. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was still the kind of person who expected danger to announce itself in a clean, obvious way. I wanted to believe it was nothing. The next night, the ice came out warm. I know how that sounds. I know how impossible it sounds. But I remember it because I touched it before I realized it was wrong. I was making a soda for a guest who had asked for ice on the side, and when I dropped the cubes into the cup, they were not cold against my fingers. They were warm. Not hot. Not even noticeably warm at first. Just wrong enough to make me pause. I held one up in the lobby light. It was cloudy and half melted at the edges, but inside it was not just trapped bubbles and frost. There was something else frozen in it. A tiny shape. Pink and curved. Like a fingerprint. I stared at it until my pulse started thudding in my ears. When it melted in my hand, I saw the ridges more clearly. A fingertip. Small, childlike, pressed into the center of the cube from the inside. I dropped it into the sink so fast the metal clanged. My manager, Denise, found me standing there with my hands wet and shaking. "You okay?" she asked. Denise was the kind of woman who wore calm like armor. She had sharp cheekbones, a neat bun, and a voice that never rose unless there was a fire alarm. She noticed everything, or I thought she did. I showed her the ice. She looked at it once and frowned. Probably a bad freeze cycle, she said. These machines jam all the time. Did you see the? It's probably mineral buildup. The way she cut me off made me feel embarrassed, like I had already become the kind of person who mistakes ordinary things for threats. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just raw from the breakup, from the move, from nights spent alone with the humming refrigerator in my studio apartment and the city sirens fading somewhere far away. Denise touched my shoulder once, quick and practical. You're new. Everything feels weird when you're new. That should have helped. It did help for a while. Then the whispers got clearer. They came from the drain under the ice machine, a low murmur that moved up through the metal grid when the lobby was empty. At first I thought it was the plumbing carrying voices from somewhere else in the building. But the words began to change. Lena. Lena, look. Lena here. I had never told anyone at work that name was not my first one. It had been years since anyone used it. I went cold every time I heard it. I said nothing at first. I kept checking the machine, opening the panel, peering inside with a flashlight while the neon sign from the liquor store across the street washed the lobby in blue and red reflections. I looked for wires, speakers, a hidden device. I found nothing except frost, water, and the ordinary damp smell of machinery. Then one night, I found my phone on the counter with a voice note already open. I had not touched it. The audio was 3 seconds long. A breath, then my own voice, soft and strained, saying, "Don't leave me alone with him." I stopped breathing. I replayed it. It was me, or something almost close enough to me that my stomach dropped anyway. My phone buzzed again before I could think. A text from an unknown number. You still say that in your sleep. I did not sleep that night. I sat behind the front desk with the lights too bright and the rain drumming harder against the glass, my coffee gone cold beside me. Every few minutes the ice machine would clatter in the hall, and under it, that second sound would move like a whisper traveling through a wall. By morning I had convinced myself someone was messing with me. A coworker prank, a guest with too much time, a camera hidden somewhere in the lobby, a bad joke that had gone farther than it should have. Then a new person started coming by after midnight. His name was Jonah. He said he was a maintenance contractor brought in to inspect the HVAC system on the upper floors. He had a gentle face, tired eyes, and the kind of voice that made you lower your shoulders without meaning to. He noticed I was tense before I said anything. "You don't look like you've had a full night in weeks," he said, leaning against the counter with a cup of black coffee. "You been sleeping at all?" "Enough," I said. He nodded like he heard the lie and did not mind it. "I used to work nights too," he said. "You get used to the building sounds. At least most of them." Something in my expression must have changed, because he looked toward the hallway and then back at me. "The ice machine," he said softly. "You hear it too." I stared at him. He lowered his voice. "You're not imagining it." That was the first time someone had said exactly the thing I was afraid to say out loud. He stayed near me after that, never crowding, never pushing. He seemed to know when I needed coffee and when I needed silence. He left a paper bag of lemon candies on the counter once, saying, "For the aftertaste when you've been up too long." I asked how he knew I liked lemon. He gave a small smile. "You buy the lemon tea from the corner cafe, the one with the cracked window. You ask for extra honey." I felt my face tighten. "You've been watching me?" His eyes held mine, calm, unoffended. "No, I'm observant." I wanted to believe him. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe he was just another lonely person who knew the habits of other lonely people. But then he mentioned the old name. Not Lena. The one before that. The one nobody used anymore because it belonged to a version of me I had buried so deep even I tried not to think about her. I set the coffee down slowly. "How do you know that?" I asked. Jonah did not answer right away. The ice machine clattered in the hall. Under it, the whisper started again. Low, almost affectionate. "Because," he said, "you leave traces." I should have walked away then. Instead I did what I always did when something felt wrong. I tried to make it make sense. I told myself he must have found me online. Maybe through social media. Maybe through old tagged photos. Maybe through the kind of digital trail everyone leaves without thinking. It was embarrassing, but plausible. Then the hotel email system started showing strange things. Guest requests with my name in the subject line. Calendar entries I had not added. A note in my work account that said, "She checked the machine again at 2:11 a.m. I showed Denise. She frowned, clicked through the log, and went still. "Someone's in the admin settings," she said. "Who?" She looked up at me, then away. "I don't know." By then I had started noticing the cameras. Not the obvious ones. Those I knew about. I mean the little details. The lobby angle changing slightly overnight. The timestamp on the elevator feed running ahead by 8 minutes. The front desk login showing a second device. An unknown phone connected to the Wi-Fi under a string of randomized numbers. Someone was inside the system. Someone was also inside the building. On the third night, I opened the ice bin and found the cubes arranged in a shape that made no sense. Not a symbol. Not exactly. 3 rows. 1 cube missing, like a mouth with a tooth pulled out. And in the center, pressed into the frost, were 5 tiny fingerprints. Fresh. Perfect. Frozen into the surface, as if the ice had formed around a hand that was still there. I backed away so quickly I hit the wall behind me. The drain below the machine gurgled. Then, very clearly, in a voice no louder than a breath, someone said, "Lena." I dropped the flashlight. It rolled under the vending machine, sending a cone of light across the floor. For 1 second, in that pale strip, I saw a shadow standing in the hallway. Not a person exactly, just the outline of one, motionless. When I lunged for the front desk phone, the shadow was gone. I called police that night. They came, checked the machine, checked the hallway, checked the service corridor. Nothing. No hidden speaker. No person in the vents. No sign of forced entry. One officer looked bored. Another looked apologetic. "Could be echo from the plumbing," he said. I almost laughed. I think I might have been near tears. Then Denise pulled me aside. "You need to stop provoking this," she whispered. I stared at her. "Provoking what?" She glanced toward the hallway. "Whoever is doing it." That was the first time I realized she was afraid. Not of the machine. Of someone. The next morning, I found a folder in my email drafts that I did not remember creating. Inside were screenshots. My apartment building. My bus route. My grocery store. The cafe where I sat every Sunday morning pretending I was reading while I watched the rain. There was even a picture of the street outside my old therapist's office. The captions were in a voice I recognized with a sick feeling in my stomach. Mine, or someone almost matching it. The text said, "She still keeps the curtains open after dark. She still flinches when men stand behind her in line. She still thinks the quiet means she is alone." I called the number attached to the draft. A man answered on the first ring. "Hello, Lena," he said. I knew his voice. Not because I had met him in real life. Because I had heard him in voice notes. In the audio files. In the whisper under the ice machine. "Jonah." He sounded patient. Almost kind. "I didn't want you to find it like this," he said. My skin went cold. "What are you doing?" "Helping," he said. Something in the background clicked. A lighter. Maybe a door. Maybe a lock. "You're very easy to watch," he said. "People think privacy is a wall. It isn't. It's just a rhythm. Once you learn it, you can step in between." I could hear my own breathing getting sharper. "You're in the hotel." A small pause. "Sometimes." I slammed the phone down and ran. Not toward the lobby. Toward the security office. The door was unlocked. Inside, the monitor wall was on. Every camera in the building was live. The hallway feed showed the ice machine corridor. Empty. Then the image glitched. Jonah appeared in the frame. He was standing right in front of the machine, face half hidden by shadow, one hand resting on the metal panel like he knew exactly where to wait. He looked straight into the camera. Then he smiled. Not broadly, not crazily, just enough to make my stomach drop. The feed switched. The lobby camera. He was behind the front desk now, next to the coffee maker, staring at the lens with the same calm expression. Then the picture cut again. The elevator camera. He was inside, holding something black in his hand. A burner phone. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Measured. I turned. Denise stood in the doorway. Her face was pale. "Don't move," she said. For one terrible second, I thought she was warning me. Then I saw the badge in her hand. Not a hotel badge. Police. She had been wearing it under her blazer. The truth unfolded in pieces after that, each one worse than the last. Jonah was not a contractor. He had been using fake credentials to enter the building for months. He had worked the maintenance rotation at 3 other properties under different names. He monitored people through hotel systems, stolen Wi-Fi access, cloned key cards, and hidden devices. The whispers had not been supernatural. They came from a mic channel routed through the drain housing, a crude setup meant to catch sound and feed it back through a speaker hidden in the utility wall. The warm ice cubes? He had been cycling the machine with a heating fault, then freezing contaminated water in short bursts to leave traces. The fingerprints were from latex molds, tiny replicas pressed into the water tray before freezing. He wanted us to notice. He wanted the fear to spread slowly. Denise had suspected something for weeks. She had been working with a detective after a guest reported a woman following them into the elevator at 2 a.m. The woman had been fake. Another identity, another mask. Jonah had been collecting patterns, routines, responses. He targeted people after breakups, relocations, divorce filings, recent trauma. People who were already tired enough to doubt themselves. People like me. The arrest happened in the service stairwell after he tried to leave through the loading bay. There was shouting, flashing lights, rain on the pavement outside. I did not see much of it clearly, only the shape of him going rigid when officers pinned him to the wall. Only the look on his face when they pulled the burner phones from his coat. Not anger, not panic, disappointment. That was what stayed with me, like I had failed him somehow. Afterward, the hotel was closed for inspection. The lobby lights were turned off. The ice machine was removed and hauled away in silence. The hallway felt too empty without it, too quiet. I expected to miss the noise, but I did not. I missed only the version of myself who had still believed the world was simple enough to explain. Police found thousands of files, voice recordings, fake profiles, photographs, messages sent to previous victims under old usernames and reused voices. He had been doing it for years, building people out of fragments, breaking them with intimacy. I moved out of the apartment a week later. I could not sleep there anymore. The silence had changed shape. Every vent sounded like a whisper. Every appliance seemed to remember him. Sometimes I still wake at night certain I hear the clatter of ice in a hallway that no longer exists. I no longer trust easy kindness. Not completely. Not at first. I no longer assume that what feels personal is safe. And I understand now that obsession does not always arrive as violence. Sometimes it arrives as attention, as recognition, as the illusion of being seen. The most dangerous people are not always the loud ones. Some of them speak softly. Some of them memorize your habits. Some of them learn the sound of your breathing through a drain and call it love. What happened to me did not end when the police closed the case. It changed the way I listen, the way I stand near doors, the way I notice reflections in windows, the way I check the dark before I speak my own name. Because privacy is not just about hiding. It is about having a self that cannot be easily entered. And once someone learns how to whisper your name from inside the walls, you never again feel entirely alone in a room that is supposed to be yours. Story 4. By the time the city turned black outside the windows, the cafe felt like a different building. Not empty, just emptied. The chairs were upside down on the tables. The espresso machine gave off its low mechanical heat. The air smelled like burnt milk, lemon cleaner, and wet wool from coats drying on the back hooks. Rain tapped the glass in thin, impatient fingers. Outside, neon from the pharmacy across the street bled into the puddles and made the sidewalk look underwater. I was the closing opener for the late shift, which meant I came in after the morning crew and stayed until the last customer drifted out. It sounded simple when I took the job. Simple was what I needed after the divorce. Simple was what I told myself when I moved into a studio apartment 2 blocks away, with a radiator that clanked all night and a silence that felt staged, like I had arrived after the rest of my life had already left. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A message from my ex. Just 2 words. "You look tired." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. We had not spoken in 11 days. He had the talent of still being able to wound me without being in the room. That was what an emotionally abusive relationship leaves behind. Not just memory. Reflex. A habit of bracing. I locked the phone, slid it away, and told myself not to think about it. Then the speaker system crackled above my head. "Thank you for staying late," a calm voice said. I froze. It was polite, smooth, slightly distorted, as if spoken through a cloth or from somewhere deep inside a wall. "Doors will secure in 10 minutes. Please complete final tasks and remain inside until the area has been counted." I looked up at the small black speaker in the corner by the pastry case. The red light was on. No one had been near the control panel. I stood there with a rag in my hand and listened to the final syllables fade into a soft hiss of static. Then the espresso machine clicked off. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next night, the same voice came through at 10:47. "Thank you for staying late. We've already counted everyone." No one spoke after that. The front doors stayed shut even though the neon open sign was still glowing in the window, and the lights above the counter were bright enough to make the rain outside look silver. I walked to the door and pushed. Nothing. I tried again, harder this time. The handle didn't move. Behind me, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon slipped from a drying rack and hit the floor with a sharp metallic ring. The cafe was not locked. I knew that for certain. I had watched the manager unlock it with the staff code 20 minutes earlier. I had checked the deadbolt myself. I had heard the click, yet the doors refused to open, and the voice had said counted. Not closed, not secured, counted. That word stayed with me long after my shift ended. My name is Mara, and 6 months ago I came to this city because it was far enough away from my old life that the streets did not know me. That was the plan. It did not stay that way. The first person to make me feel safe here was a man named Jonah. He came in near midnight 3 nights a week, always after the rush, always when the rain had begun to thin into mist. He wore dark coats and soft scarves and carried himself with the careful politeness of someone trying not to take up too much space. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, and sat at the table by the window where the streetlight cut a pale rectangle across the floor. He never asked for anything unusual. He never forced conversation. He just noticed things. "You always clean the espresso wand twice," he said one night, not looking up from his cup. "Most people miss the second pass." I laughed because it felt easier than asking how he knew to watch. "I've worked service jobs," he said. "You get good at noticing what keeps people calm." He had a low voice, controlled, warm, but not performative. The kind of voice that made you stop guarding every sentence. I told myself that was all it was. A nice regular. A quiet man with good manners. Maybe I was lonely enough to confuse that with trust. He learned my routines too quickly. My shift ended at 11:30, unless the manager kept me for inventory. I took the back route home because the main street was louder and the intersection near the station made me anxious since the divorce. I always bought tea from the corner store on Tuesdays, and I always stood by the window for 30 seconds before leaving because I liked to see whether my apartment light was already on by mistake. Jonah knew all of it. One night he said, "You don't like the blue umbrella by the door. You always avoid it." I looked at him. "I'm sorry." He lifted one shoulder. "The one with the torn handle. You move around it every time you come in." I didn't realize I did that. You do. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe people notice things. Maybe I had become suspicious because I had spent 2 years being told I was too sensitive, too anxious, too much. I wanted to believe him. Then the messages started. First on dating apps, then on Instagram, then by email. Not threats. Not at first. Just attention. "You look better when you tie your hair back." You always choose the window seat. You still keep the blue mug at home. At home. I had never posted a photo of that mug. I sat on my bed in the dark, phone buzzing in my hand, the radiator clicking like teeth in the wall. I checked the sender. Fake profile. No real photo. A name that changed every other day. When I blocked one account, another appeared. Same tone. Same precision. Same calm. One voice note came in at 1:13 a.m. It was my own voice. I played it 3 times before I could breathe. "Don't make a scene," my voice said softly, almost gently. "You're safe when you listen." I sat up so fast my phone fell onto the blanket. My own voice. My exact cadence. My little hesitation before the last word. I deleted it, then checked the file details. The metadata had been scrubbed. Cleaned. Someone knew how to hide. The cafe announcement returned the next night. "Thank you for staying late. We've already counted everyone." This time the front doors stayed locked, even after we finished the closing checklist. I turned the handle until my wrist hurt. The glass reflected my face back at me in the dark, pale and drawn and smaller than I remembered. Behind my reflection, the room seemed too deep, too still. Jonah was there, seated at the far booth, his coffee untouched. "Do you hear that?" I asked. He looked up slowly. "Hear what?" "The speaker." He studied me with an expression that was almost kind. "It sounds like a system message. It says we've already counted everyone." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "That's not what it said." I stared at him. "It said the doors will lock in 10 minutes. No, my throat had gone dry. "That's not what it said. Maybe you're tired." It was the first time he had ever used that tone. Soft, measured, like someone stepping toward an animal that might bolt. A minute later, when I reached for my phone, it buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. A text. "You can hear what you need to hear." The cafe swayed around me. I looked up too quickly. Jonah was still at the booth. Still calm. Still watching me like he was waiting for the shape of my fear to finish forming. I left the phone face down on the counter and told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that because the alternative was harder. The next day I searched his name online. Nothing useful. Too little. No LinkedIn. No tagged photos. No social media. A few outdated records that did not match. I tried reverse image search on the one picture he had once shown me. A blurry photo of a dog in snow. It belonged to someone else. That was the first crack. The second came from my apartment. I had been asleep when my phone vibrated against the nightstand. 3 missed calls. 2 emails. 1 new voicemail from an unknown number. When I played it, I heard breathing. Then my own voice again. This time softer. Closer. "I'm sorry," it said. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I sat up, heart hammering so hard it made my ribs ache. On the recorder, a faint sound in the background. A kettle boiling. My kettle. I had left it plugged in. I had left it on. My apartment door was locked. The chain was on. The window was shut. Still, I went through every room with the lights on, checking closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No one. But when I came back to the kitchen, my laptop was open. I was sure I had closed it. On the screen was a folder I had never seen before. Inside it were screenshots. My routes. My calendar. Photos taken through windows. Images from the cafe. From the street. From outside my apartment. And one folder named after me. Not my full legal name. The name only one person had ever used. Maribert. My ex had called me that when he wanted to soften me before asking for something cruel. I had not heard that nickname in years. I went cold all over. The next night I did not go to work. I sat in my apartment with the overhead light on, every lamp in the place burning, and waited for the phone to ring. Rain moved down the window in silver threads. Sirens passed somewhere far off. The radiator hissed. My stomach hurt from not eating. At 10:49, the cafe speaker message played through my laptop. I had not connected my laptop to any speaker, yet the voice came out of the tiny built-in screen with perfect clarity. "Thank you for staying late. We've already counted everyone." Then, after a pause, "Mara, please come to the front door." I dropped the laptop so hard it cracked the corner of the table. There was a knock. 3 measured taps. My breath stopped. Then a second knock. I did not move. A voice from the hallway. Calm. Familiar. "It's Jonah," he said. "Open the door." My eyes went to the deadbolt, then to the chain, then to my phone. 1 bar of signal. 1 missed call from a hidden number. Then another, and another. I called the police. My voice shook so badly I had to repeat my address twice. I told them someone was outside. I told them I had been monitored. I told them about the voice notes, the fake profiles, the cafe messages, the cloned audio, the way the system spoke as if it knew my life better than I did. The officer on the line asked me not to open the door. I laughed once, almost hysterically. I wasn't going to. There was another knock. Then silence. When the police arrived, Jonah was gone. But the cafe was not. They searched the building before sunrise. Behind the manager's office, inside a locked utility cabinet, they found a laptop, a small battery pack, a burner phone, and a compact audio interface wired into the speaker system. They found folders full of screenshots. My photos, my work schedule, the routes I took home, thousands of entries. Not just me, other names too, other women, different cities, same pattern, different personas, same handwriting. Jonah had never existed. Not fully. He was a mask, a repeatable shape, built from stolen images, old accounts, and carefully tuned language. A long-running obsession campaign. Multiple victims. Same emotional sequence. Same polite approach. Same descent into certainty. He did not just watch. He curated. He mirrored. He learned how to sound safe. And he had enough access to the cafe systems to make the speaker say whatever he wanted. The officer who showed me the evidence kept his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might make the whole thing more real. He was in the building more than we thought, he said, and he was using remote access to trigger the announcements. I sat in the back of the squad car with a blanket around my shoulders and watched dawn spread over the city. Rain had stopped. The windows were fogged at the edges. The streets looked washed clean, which felt obscene. They found him 2 days later in a rented apartment across town. No dramatic confrontation. No struggle worth turning into a story people would enjoy. Just a door opened by police and a room full of phones, notebooks, burner SIM cards, and printed photos of strangers living ordinary lives. Evidence, not mystery. The sort of thing that makes a person feel less haunted and more ashamed for having been fooled. But fooled is the wrong word. That would imply it was quick. It wasn't quick. It was patience. It was repetition. It was trust, borrowed one small piece at a time. I did not go back to that cafe. I found another job, another apartment. I changed my number. I locked my accounts down one by one, deleting old photos, revoking permissions, turning off every app that wanted to know where I was. The city kept moving. Rain still fell. Trains still screamed beneath the streets. Late-night buses still hissed to a stop in front of glowing windows. Sometimes I still wake up when my phone buzzes. Sometimes I still listen for breathing that is not mine. And sometimes, when I pass a cafe after closing, I hear a speaker crackle somewhere inside and feel my body go cold before my mind catches up. I survived. That is the truth. But survival is not the same as returning. Trust is a door that once opened easily for me. Now I check the locks twice, and even then I do not fully believe them. Privacy used to feel like a luxury. Now it feels like the last thin line between being a person and becoming a pattern someone else can study. I used to think obsession was loud. It is not. It is quiet, polite, careful. It knows your name before you decide to answer. Story 5. I started working nights because I didn't trust silence anymore. That was the honest answer anyway. The version I gave people was simpler, better. I said I liked the extra pay. I said I was a night person. I said the quiet suited me. What I did not say was that I had just left a man who turned every room into a place I had to apologize for. A man who never hit me, which somehow made it harder to explain. He had used words instead. Exact words. Surgical words. He knew how to make me shrink without touching me. By the end, I could not tell whether I was scared of him or the version of myself he had spent 2 years manufacturing. So I moved to a smaller apartment on the edge of the city. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a view of a brick building that reflected nothing back. I worked at a grocery store on the late shift, stocking shelves after midnight, sweeping wet footprints near the entrance, listening to the refrigerator compressors hum like distant machinery in a ship's hull. Rain was constant that season. It tapped the front windows and turned the parking lot into a smear of neon reflections. Blue from the pharmacy sign, red from the traffic light, white from passing cars that never stayed long. The store had one oddity everyone joked about and no one wanted to own. Aisle 9. It was the grocery aisle with breakfast cereal on one side and canned soup on the other. Nothing strange in daylight. But on the night shift, every few nights, I would see the same customer wandering it in the same pattern. Middle-aged, tall, dark coat, hands in his pockets. He never bought much. 1 bottle of water, sometimes gum, once a loaf of bread, but he always walked the same route. From the end cap with the pasta sauce to the frozen waffles. Past the canned beans. Stop. Turn. Go back 3 steps. Pause in front of the soup. Then the cereal. Then he would return to the beginning and do it again. Not browsing. Not lost. Measured. Like he was counting something only he could hear. The first time I noticed him, I was front-facing the dairy cooler while a soft jazz station played through the store speakers. Some old instrumental thing with a tired saxophone in it. The kind of music that made the fluorescent lights feel almost kind. He looked up at me from the aisle and gave a small nod, as if we had already met. I looked down at the inventory sheet and told myself I was overthinking it. But after closing, I checked the security footage because I could not get the feeling out of my chest. The aisle was empty. Not just empty of him, empty of everyone. No movement. No cart, no shadow passing the end of the row, just the camera angle, the long fluorescent hum, and my own reflection in the glass of the freezer doors. I rewound it 3 times. Nothing. I told myself the camera had glitched. The old store system was bad. The image stuttered if someone slammed a freezer door too hard. That had to be it. I wanted to believe it. Then he came back the next night. Same coat, same pace. Same route through aisle 9. Except this time, when I looked toward the aisle, he was already watching me. Not smiling, not threatening, just attentive. There is a particular kind of attention that feels worse than anger. It feels rehearsed. It feels practiced. It feels personal before it has earned the right to be. He reached for a box of instant oatmeal, held it for a second, then put it back. I watched his mouth move as if he were counting under his breath. When he passed me at the end of the aisle, he said quietly, "You always face the labels outward." I blinked. "What?" He nodded at the cereal shelves. "You turn them when you're anxious. The corners line up better when you're trying to feel in control." I actually laughed once. A short, disbelieving breath. "Do I know you?" "I don't think so," he said, but his voice stayed with me after he left. Low, calm. The kind of voice that made people lean in before they realized they had moved. I checked the footage again after closing. Aisle 9. Empty. The entire night. No one. For the next week, he returned every other night. Same route. Same pause points. Same invisible presence on camera. I started timing it. 1:42 a.m. on Monday. 1:39 on Wednesday. 1:41 on Friday. I told my coworker Jules about it during a break in the back room while the vending machine hummed and the ice maker cracked inside the wall. She frowned. Could be a camera blind spot. It's not just the camera. He knows things. Jules sipped her coffee. Like what? I hesitated. That was the problem. The things he knew were small enough to sound stupid out loud. That I preferred black coffee on nights when I couldn't sleep. That I kept my keys in the left pocket of my jacket. That I had once used an old nickname in a password reset email at work because I was tired and lonely and not thinking. that I used to hum the same song every time I stocked bread because it matched the rhythm of my hands. "Maybe he works here," she said. "No, maybe he knows you from somewhere." I had no answer for that. I went home after my shift and locked the door twice. My apartment was quiet in that unnerving way. The refrigerator hummed. Pipes clicked inside the walls. Somewhere downstairs, a television murmured through thin plaster. I made toast I did not finish. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then it buzzed. Unknown number. "You look tired tonight." I sat very still. Another buzz. "You should sleep on your right side. Your shoulder hurts less that way. Asterisk asterisk." My hand went cold around the phone. I called the number. It rang once and went dead. Blocked. I tried to tell myself it was a scam, a wrong number, a recycled text from somebody else. But the next morning, there was a message on a dating app one had barely used in weeks. The profile had no photo, just a blank gray silhouette and a name, Eli. Asterisk, "I know you don't trust easily." "That's okay." Asterisk. My stomach tightened. Asterisk, "You fold your receipts before throwing them away. You say it's because you hate clutter, but really it's because you like things neat when the inside isn't." Asterisk. I sat on the edge of my bed and read the message 4 times. There are moments when fear doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives as clarity. Suddenly every ordinary thing in the room looks arranged by someone else. The window, the hallway noise, the shadow under the dresser. I deleted the app. Then the email started. One from a new address, no subject line. Just a link to a photo. It was a picture of me leaving the store, taken from across the street in the rain. My hair pulled back, my coat half-zipped, my face turned down against the weather. Below it, one line. "You always look like you're apologizing to the night." I had no idea how he got my email. I blocked one account and 3 more appeared. A voice note came through from a burner number. It sounded like me. Not exactly me. A close copy. Same breath. Same pauses. Same flat exhaustion in the middle of the sentence. Asterisk, "I'm fine. I'm just tired. Don't worry about me." Asterisk. I didn't remember recording it. I searched online in a panic, checking my own accounts, looking for signs of intrusion. My email had been accessed from a device I didn't recognize. My social media had followed and unfollowed strangers I'd never heard of. One account had liked photos from 3 years earlier. Another had posted nothing at all, but had a profile picture of aisle 9 from the store, taken from the end of the row. The next night at work, I saw him at the far end of the aisle. Same coat, except this time he was not alone. A woman stood beside him, staring at the cereal labels. A little older than me. Blank face. Not frightened. Not aware enough to be frightened. He leaned toward her and said something I couldn't hear. She smiled in the way people smile when someone seems kind. Then he looked at me and smiled too. I dropped the box of crackers in my hand. When I went to the aisle, they were gone. Not walked away. Gone. The end cap was empty. The shopping cart was gone. Even the overhead light seemed too bright, too innocent. Jules told me I needed sleep. I said maybe. I told myself I was stressed. Maybe I was overthinking. Then I met Mara. She came in around 1 a.m. every Thursday with a paper cup from the cafe across the street. She had a quiet face and a voice that never rose above the noise of the refrigerators. She asked me where the almond milk was, and when I showed her, she said, "You look like someone who doesn't get enough of a break." It was such a normal sentence that I almost cried. After that, she started coming in more often. Not in a way that felt aggressive, just enough to seem natural. She worked early shifts at the clinic 3 blocks over. She liked the same jazz station I left playing when I stocked shelves. She noticed when my hands shook from too much coffee and slid me a packet of sugar without asking. "You always leave here looking like you're bracing for bad news," she said one night near the register. I gave a tired smile. That obvious? Only if you've lived through it. There was no flirtation in it. That was why I trusted her. I told her small things at first. The breakup, the move, the apartment that felt too quiet, the way I kept hearing footsteps in the hallway outside my door. and assuming they were mine. She listened with an expression so steady it almost felt safe. Then, one night, she said, "You used to be called Annie." I stopped breathing. No one here knew that. Not even Jules. Mara looked at me, and her face did not change. "I'm sorry," I said. "How do you know that?" She tilted her head slightly. "You used to sign your old email that way. When you were 16. You liked the name because it sounded less visible." I had never told anyone that. Not ever. I wanted to believe there was a harmless explanation, a mutual connection, a public record, a family friend, some coincidence that would collapse if I pulled at it hard enough. But my body had already answered before my mind did. My skin had gone tight with warning. That night I checked my apartment door 3 times. The deadbolt was fine. The chain too. Still, I slept with the light on. At 3:12 a.m., my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Unknown number. A single photo. My living room. Taken from the hallway. The edge of my couch. The lamp I never turned on anymore. The dish towel over the kitchen chair. Someone had been outside my door. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and went into the hallway. The corridor smelled faintly of wet concrete and old carpet. Every apartment door was closed. Silent. No television. No footsteps. Just the low mechanical hum of the building's water heater. At the end of the hall, something white was tucked under my door. I walked toward it so slowly it felt like I was moving through thick water. It was an envelope. Inside was a printed sheet of paper and a receipt from my store. The receipt was mine. The timestamp was from a week ago. On the back, in neat handwriting, "You should stop asking cameras to tell you what you already know. They only show what people want seen. Asterisk, asterisk." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I called the police. They took it seriously only after I showed them the message archive, the voice clone, the account activity, the repeated visits at the store, the photographs, the hidden access to my email. One officer finally looked up from the evidence sheet and asked, "Do you know anyone named Mara?" My throat tightened. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, fake profiles, messages sent to 3 other women, all night shift workers, all in different parts of the city. The same tone, the same calm attention, the same invasive detail. Mara wasn't Mara. She was his construction, a name he used when he wanted access without alarm. The man from the aisle had a real name too, though it hardly mattered by then. He was a former security contractor who had worked with the store's camera vendor. He knew blind spots. He knew how to loop feeds. He knew the hours women left work alone and the exact kind of loneliness that made a person easier to enter. He had been watching for months, maybe longer. The police found a spare key to my apartment in a drawer of his temporary room across town. They found a binder full of receipts, routines, screenshots, maps of my commute, and notes about my habits written in careful, patient handwriting. Not random obsession. A campaign. A process. He had built a version of me from fragments and then used that version to reach me. The woman from the cafe. The voice notes. The blank profile. Even the timing of the messages. All of it designed to make me feel known before I felt threatened. That was the worst part. How gently it had been done. How much of me had leaned toward it before I knew better. They arrested him 2 days later in a parking lot behind a pharmacy. He did not run. He did not shout. When they put him in the cruiser, he looked at me through the rain and gave the smallest nod, as if we were still in the aisle together. I did not sleep for 3 nights after that. Not really. I kept the lights on in my apartment and listened to the refrigerator hum and the pipes click and the rain tap the glass like a patient hand. Every sound felt edited now. Every shadow had a history. I quit the store a week later. Jules hugged me at the door and did not ask for details. I was grateful for that. I moved again before the month ended. New apartment, new locks, new route to work, new coffee shop, new names for my passwords. I changed what I could. It helped less than I wanted and more than I expected. Some nights I still wake up and listen for footsteps in the hall. Some nights I still hear the soft buzz of a phone and feel my stomach drop before I remember I am alone. I wish I could say fear ended when he was arrested. It did not. It simply changed shape. It became caution. It became a habit. It became the habit of checking the lock before I trust a room, of looking twice at a face that seems too familiar, of understanding that being seen can feel like kindness right up until it becomes possession. Aisle 9 was repainted after I left. I heard that from Jules months later. New signs, new layout, different lights. But the strange thing about being followed is that it teaches you a difficult truth. People do not have to be in front of you to reach you. They can learn your shape from the spaces you leave behind. And privacy is not just about locked doors. It is about the right to remain unread. Story 6. I moved to this city because I thought running away could fix me. The breakup was still raw, too recent, too permanent. Nights alone in my apartment were loud with silence. My own breathing sounded like an accusation. The neighbor's footsteps, the refrigerator hum, the drip from the leaky faucet, it all felt magnified, and I couldn't escape it. The job at the 24-hour grocery store seemed safe. Predictable. Fluorescent lights, the hum of freezers, the beep of scanners. I stocked shelves, swept floors, arranged displays. Nights were long but quiet, and that quiet was something I clung to. It started raining the night it all changed. I had stayed late to finish restocking the beverage aisle. Neon signs outside reflected in puddles like liquid glass. A delivery truck rumbled past, headlights painting the ceiling white through the glass front. I turned off the main registers and went to check the exit doors. A malfunction had locked them. The panic alarm blinked but would not sound. I rattled the handles. Nothing. I waited. 15 minutes. 20. Then the lights flickered off. I was in darkness. I called the store manager. No answer. My phone buzzed once, then went dead. And then the lights came back on. But the store was different. The bread aisle smelled faintly of stale yeast. Products I didn't recognize lined the shelves. Brands that no longer existed, labels yellowed and curling at the edges. Cans had prices that were absurdly low, and the cereal aisle displayed boxes I remembered eating as a child, years before this building even existed. I walked toward the exit. The glass doors led me back to the same aisle. Same display of neon carrots and cabbage. I tried another exit. Same result. A creeping realization sank into my chest. The store was outside time. I rationalized. Exhaustion, sleep deprivation, anxiety, maybe a vivid hallucination brought on by stress. But then I heard footsteps. Soft, echoing in the empty aisles. Not mine. Hello, I called. My voice bounced back as if swallowed. A shadow emerged. Not threatening, calm, attentive, observing. Her name was Clara. She claimed to be an employee working nights, though I had never seen her before. She smiled at me in a way that made me want to relax. For the first time since moving here, I felt a measure of comfort. You look tired, she said. You shouldn't be up so late alone. I laughed, small and brittle. I work nights. She tilted her head, eyes calm. You hum when you stock the bread. You hum a lot when you're nervous. My breath caught. That was impossible. Maybe I do, I muttered. I like it, she said. It's comforting. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she had been working here longer than I thought. Maybe she observed employees. I wanted to believe it. The nights blurred together. I became lost in the store, wandering through aisles that seemed to shift subtly when I wasn't looking. Shelves rearranged themselves. Signs were new. Sometimes the produce looked rotted, sometimes fresh. Clara knew things she shouldn't. My routines. My favorite coffee blend. The jazz station I listened to while sweeping floors. She remembered a nickname I had used in a college dorm years ago. Small details that should have been private. I rationalized. She was just observant, attentive, caring. Maybe I overshared. I told myself it made sense. But the aisles grew stranger. Cereal boxes from decades ago, soup labels I had never seen. Refrigerators hummed in impossible tones, as if powered by some unseen engine. I tried to leave. Every exit led me back inside. I started documenting. Photos, videos, notes. Nothing explained itself. The store seemed alive, responsive, intentional. Emails arrived from accounts I did not recognize. Messages on a dating app one had used once. Voice notes with a voice almost like mine, whispering my routines, my habits, things I had never shared digitally. Clara's presence grew more invasive. She appeared when I least expected it, waiting near aisles I had just passed. She referenced things I only thought in private. The books I brought for lunch breaks, the way I folded my clothes, my preferred routes home. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress of relocation, isolation, and a broken heart had fractured reality. The spiral accelerated. Products whispered my name in printed text I did not recognize. Freezer doors reflected faces that weren't mine. Lights flickered in rhythms matching the beat of my heartbeat. I started hearing Clara when she wasn't there. Soft footsteps behind me, a laugh in the dairy aisle, the distant scrape of a cart in the corner. One night, I confronted her. "You know too much," I said, voice tight with fear and disbelief. She smiled, calm, patient, observant. "I only know what you let me see." It was terrifying. How calmly she spoke, how intimate, how invasive. Her eyes held something I didn't want to name. Control. Possession. Knowledge without permission. I called the police. I sent emails to corporate. I tried to leave the store, but it would not let me. Not then. Not ever. I was trapped in a labyrinth that shifted, rearranged, and learned. Eventually, the truth revealed itself. Clara was not Clara. The voice notes, the messages, the social media activity, they all led to a man with access to the store's systems. Someone who had studied my habits long before I stepped inside. He had constructed the persona to gain my trust, to manipulate, to observe. Multiple victims. The store had trapped them all. Each aisle a mirror. Each product a reflection. Each exit a loop back to the beginning. The police found him eventually. Evidence overwhelming. Accounts, metadata, devices, logs. He had mapped loneliness, attention, and trust as a meticulous experiment. I survived, but I did not leave unscarred. I walk streets that are quieter now. I lock doors carefully. I change routines. I watch reflections in glass. I listen for the hum of appliances, footsteps, distant sirens. Every familiar sound is layered with suspicion. The store no longer exists in my memory as a physical place. It exists as a lesson. Trust is a fragile construct. Identity can be traced, mirrored, manipulated. Safety is a fragile illusion. And sometimes, when the wind taps the window just so, I can almost hear the aisles calling my name, reminding me, some spaces never truly let you leave. Story 7. The first time I saw the aisle, it wasn't supposed to be there. I had walked past that section of the grocery store dozens of times. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, polished linoleum reflecting my own pale face, rain tapping the windows outside in a staccato rhythm. Neon signs from the street stretched across the wet sidewalks like liquid ribbons. The smell of damp coats and coffee clung to the air. I was pushing a basket that smelled faintly of vegetables and disinfectant, thinking about my apartment, silent except for the fridge humming in the corner and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I had moved to this city 6 weeks ago after my divorce. My ex had spent years eroding me in tiny, precise ways. Insults tucked into sentences, affection conditional on obedience, love measured in control. I'd left with nothing but the clothes on my back, a bruised sense of self, and the hollow ache of someone finally gone. The aisle appeared just beyond the frozen foods section. I stopped. It wasn't on the store map. There were no signs above it, just a narrow corridor of tall shelves painted in pale blue. The smell was slightly off, old paper, faint perfume, something metallic. I didn't know why, but my hand lingered on the edge of a shelf, feeling the plastic coating smooth cold. Then I noticed the items. Not products for sale. Personal items. Diaries. Polaroids. A set of keys tied together with a frayed ribbon. A baseball cap I'd seen somewhere before. A library card. Each item labeled with a name. names I recognized from local news clippings. Missing persons, people who had vanished over the years. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder, and the rain outside made the glass walls ripple like water. My basket toppled over, spilling a couple of carrots and a carton of eggs. "Excuse me," a calm voice said. I turned. A man in a gray coat leaned against the end of the aisle. Mid-30s, quiet demeanor, eyes sharp but not unkind. He smiled faintly, not the kind of smile meant to comfort, more like the kind meant to reassure you that he knew something you didn't. "I didn't see you there," he said. "That aisle, it's easy to miss." I tried to find words. I don't understand. Where did this come from?" He tilted his head. "Some things are only visible when you're ready to see them." I laughed once, nervous. "That makes no sense." "Maybe," he said, "but it makes sense to someone." He introduced himself as Jonas. He worked in loss prevention, or so he said. He had a quiet, careful way of observing the store, almost as if he could read the items on the shelves without touching them. I wanted to believe he was harmless. I told myself it made sense. The next day, I went back with a friend from my building, Tara. She had been my only anchor in this city so far. Loud, pragmatic, the kind of person who could make you laugh even when your chest felt hollow. I led her to the aisle. It wasn't there. I laughed awkwardly. I must have imagined it. Tara shrugged. "Maybe you were tired." But I wasn't tired. Not enough. Not the way my body recognized fear and suspicion and couldn't sleep at night. Over the next week, I noticed strange coincidences. Items from the aisle began appearing elsewhere. Diaries left in the lost and found. Polaroids tucked into shopping bags. A key left on the counter beside my basket. Each one belonged to someone I had read about in old missing person reports. Every time, the same calm, quiet presence of Jonas nearby. Always watching, but never interfering. Always just present enough that I felt seen. That made me trust him. And that trust felt like a mistake. One night, after closing, I found a notebook on the floor of my apartment. My apartment, where I had locked every door and checked every window. The notebook was old, its edges frayed, and inside were notes about my routines. The exact time I made coffee. The favorite seat I took in the corner of the living room. The song I hummed softly when nobody was around. I froze. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voice note. Static. Then his voice. Calm. Attentive. Knowing. "You always leave the light on in the kitchen." I noticed. "It makes it easier for you to see." I dropped the phone. I wanted to believe it was a prank. That it was someone messing with me. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. But I didn't sleep that night. I left the light on just in case. The next morning at the grocery store, I began paying attention to the missing aisle. It had appeared again. Only I noticed. Jonas was there, as if expecting me. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Neither should you," I replied. He didn't flinch. Didn't even raise an eyebrow. The shelves were fuller this time. Diaries stacked neatly, photos taped to the edges, jewelry in small boxes, keys hanging from hooks. Each labeled with a name. Names I knew. Names I remembered. Names that had disappeared. I picked up a diary. The first page had my initials. I froze. Jonas's calm voice behind me. "It helps to look, doesn't it? Why? Why is any of this here?" He sighed. Not a human sigh. Something trained. Measured. Emotionally intelligent. Because someone has to remember. I wanted to believe he meant well. I wanted to believe he was just a custodian of forgotten lives. I told myself it made sense. Days later, a friend of mine from a dating app called. New profile. Old photos. Everything familiar. He knew my favorite cafe. My morning routine. My childhood nickname. He knew what I had eaten for breakfast. Every detail I had only shared with Jonas in passing. The pieces fell together like shards of glass. Jonas had been constructing an ecosystem of observation. Multiple victims, multiple identities. The aisle, the objects, the recordings. Everything designed to track, study, and manipulate. Every comforting word, every attentive glance, every faintly protective gesture, calculated. One night, I followed the aisle. It led me to a back door in the storage room. Concrete steps, cold and damp. The shelves continued down the steps, stacked with items I recognized. Diaries, photographs, wallets, trinkets, keys. Everything cataloged meticulously. Names, dates, notes. I called the police. Jonas tried to stop me. Calm, soft, gentle, observant. "You don't understand," he whispered. "They need this. I'm protecting them. You shouldn't open this." I ignored him. The police arrived minutes later. They found the hidden room. Hundreds of personal belongings. Logs of surveillance. Cameras. Files with metadata. Each item tied to a person who had disappeared from the town over the last decade. Jonas was arrested. Evidence showed multiple fake personas, burner phones, social media tracking, and long-term obsession. The aisle, the shelves, the private cataloging. It had all been a manipulation campaign disguised as concern. Months later, I still dream of that aisle. The humming fluorescent lights. The cold touch of plastic diaries. Rain tapping the store windows. The smell of old paper and faint perfume. The neon reflections in wet city streets. I survived, but I am not the same. I understand now that observation is not always protection. Attention can be a trap. Trust can be constructed by someone who understands how to bend your vulnerability. And sometimes the most terrifying aisles in life are not missing. They are the ones you are too afraid to walk down. Because every step reveals something you cannot unsee. And every item left behind is a reminder that privacy, identity, and safety are not guarantees. They are choices we make and boundaries we must guard before someone else designs them for us. Story 8. The cart appeared at the edge of the parking lot every night at 1:17 a.m. I know the time because I started checking it the way some people check the weather. Automatically. Fear has a way of creating rituals. The store lights were always dimmed by then. The bakery section smelled like old sugar and warm dust. The refrigerators kept up their low mechanical hum. Outside, rain turned the asphalt into a black sheet of glass, and the neon from the pharmacy next door bled into every puddle. I was the one who first saw it. A shopping cart. Full. Not from our store. Not from any store, as far as I could tell. There were no price stickers on the handles. No company logo. Just a cart standing under the broken yellow light at the far end of the lot, as if someone had abandoned it there and then forgotten to come back. It was always different. One night it held canned peaches, a child's red rain boot, 3 boxes of instant noodles, and a cracked picture frame with the glass removed. The next night there were batteries, a stack of unopened uniforms, a bouquet of flowers gone brown at the edges, and a cassette tape still wrapped in plastic. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe a neighboring store had dumped damaged inventory. Maybe teenagers. Maybe some lonely person with too much time. I wanted to believe it. That was the first mistake. I had taken the job after a breakup that had hollowed me out in slow, careful layers. Not the kind that ends in shouting. Worse, the kind that ends in quiet, in one person learning to read your silence like a map and then using it to leave. After 6 years with someone who knew exactly how to make me doubt my own memory, I had moved into a small apartment above a laundromat and started over. My place smelled like detergent and rain. The refrigerator hummed too loudly in the night. My phone buzzed with messages I did not answer. I was lonely in a way that made the city feel like it was built around everyone except me. So when Nia started talking to me on the night shift, I noticed. She was new too, technically, though she had been around long enough to know where everything was and how the manager liked the shelves faced. She had a calm voice. Low. Steady. The kind of voice that made a tired person feel less ridiculous for being tired. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said one night while we were breaking down boxes in the back. "I haven't," I said. She nodded like that made sense. "I noticed," she said gently. "You always make coffee too strong when you're trying not to think." I looked at her. She smiled a little, not enough to be flirtation, just enough to feel warm. "How would you know that?" You put 2 sugars in every time except Thursdays. Thursdays you skip them. My stomach tightened. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. No, she said. You didn't. That should have unsettled me more than it did. But I was tired, and Nia was easy to be around. She listened without demanding a performance. She remembered my favorite cheap tea. She brought me a muffin from the bakery section when she noticed I skipped lunch. She asked about the apartment and listened when I admitted it was too quiet. I wanted to believe her kindness was just kindness. Then she knew things she should not have known. My old nickname, the one my ex used when he was being sweet enough to blur the edges of the day. The cafe on Mercer where I used to sit after work before the breakup, the one with the soft jazz and the chipped blue cups. The song I played on repeat when I could not sleep. A childhood detail I had never mentioned to anyone at the store. My father used to call me Sparrow when I was 7, and nobody had said that name aloud in years. Nia said it once, very softly, while we were standing near the front registers as rain tapped the windows. I stared at her. Who told you that? She looked almost sad. No one, she said. That night, I saw the cart up close. It was sitting in the far corner of the lot beneath the dead street lamp, its metal frame shining wetly in the rain. The front wheel was twisted inward. The basket was full to the top, overloaded with things I could not explain. Packages, clothes, a radio with no batteries, a folded child's jacket, one black glove, one empty envelope with my name written on it in blue ink. My throat tightened. I reached for it without thinking. A voice behind me said, "Don't." I turned. Nia stood under the awning by the side door, her hair damp from the rain, her expression unreadable. Why not? She hesitated. Because people who touch it disappear for an hour. I barked out a short, nervous laugh. That sounds insane. It is, she said, and it's still true. I waited for her to smile, to admit she was messing with me. She didn't. You're saying they vanish? I asked. They go missing, she said, for 60 minutes. Then they come back. And she met my eyes, and they're different. I should have walked away. Instead, I looked at the cart again. The rain had started coming down harder, drumming against the blacktop. Somewhere beyond the lot, a siren rose and faded. Different how? Nia's voice lowered. They forget their own passwords. They answer to names they haven't used in years. They know things they shouldn't know. One guy came back and knew how to open the manager's office lock on the first try, even though he'd never seen it before. I swallowed. That's not possible. She gave me a tired little shrug. Neither is the cart. I wanted to believe she was trying to scare me off. I wanted to think it was a hazing thing, a local rumor, an ugly joke people used to entertain themselves on the night shift. But then I noticed something. The cart had no reflection in the store window behind it. Only the rain. Only the yellow smear of the lot light. No cart. I blinked hard. When I looked again, the cart was there. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I nearly dropped it. There was only a single text. Do not touch the cart unless you are ready to lose an hour. The message disappeared before I could screenshot it. I looked up at Nia. She had gone still. Did you send that? I asked. No. Then who? Inside, she said, suddenly sharp. Now. We barely made it through the side door before the store lights flickered once and dimmed. The next morning, one of the cashiers named Ramon asked where Greg had gone. Greg was the overnight stock guy. Quiet. Married. Always wore the same black watch with the cracked face. He had been there the previous night when the cart appeared. He had gone outside after midnight to smoke, according to the security footage we later pulled, and he had stopped dead in the lot when he saw it. Then he had reached for the handle and vanished. Not on camera. Not cleanly. Just stepped out of frame, and when the footage resumed, the cart was gone. The rain kept falling. The lot stayed empty. An hour later, Greg walked back in through the side door. He did not look injured. He looked wrong. At first it was tiny things. He forgot his locker code. He did not answer to Greg for a few seconds when called. Then he started asking where the storage aisle was, even though he had worked there for months. He smiled too slowly. He stared at the freezer door like he had recognized it from somewhere he could not place. By the end of the shift, he had asked me a question that made my skin prickle. Do you ever feel like the building knows your name before you do? I did not answer. He laughed faintly. Sorry, that sounded weird. It didn't sound weird. It sounded memorized. Nia found me by the condiment aisle after closing. Her phone was in her hand. The screen glowed blue in the dark. I found something, she said. She showed me a fake profile account that had been messaging employees for weeks. Harmless at first glance. Friendly. The kind of account people accept because it looks like someone from the neighborhood. It used photos of a woman with soft features, a bookstore bio, a dating app-style profile picture. The messages were small at first. How was your shift? You look tired tonight. Don't forget the card in the lot. Then I saw the message thread attached to my name. It knew my schedule, my apartment block, the cafe I visited on Thursdays, my old nickname. Nia tapped the screen and showed me the metadata, the location tags, the timestamps. The posts were being sent from inside the store network, then bounced through burner accounts and deleted within minutes. Who is doing this? I asked. Her face tightened. Someone who already knows where all the blind spots are. The cart stayed out there every night after that, sometimes with new items, sometimes with things we recognized. A set of employee lanyards, a spare key ring. One night, a child's school photo in a frame with the face scratched out. Another night, a phone still open to the camera roll, filled with pictures of the parking lot taken from inside a car that didn't appear on any camera feed. People kept touching it. People kept vanishing for an hour. When they came back, they were altered in small, frightening ways. One stock clerk started using phrases from conversations I had only had in my apartment, alone. One cashier knew the exact order of a song my mother used to play on rainy Sundays. Greg stopped sleeping. He stood in the break room at 1:17 a.m. every night and stared at the wall like he was waiting for a command. I wanted to believe it was stress. Maybe the lot light was making shadows where there were none. Maybe the night shift was turning everyone strange. Maybe I was overthinking because I was already halfway fragile from the breakup and the loneliness and the long, private habit of being made to doubt myself. Then I found my own name tag in the cart. It was tucked beneath a folded jacket. My full name, store issued, official, except I had never worn that style of tag. It was an old format, years older than this location. The back had a number written in black marker. I turned it over in my hand and felt my stomach drop. That was the same number on the missing employee records Nia later pulled from the office printer. 17 staff members over 8 years. Gone for an hour. Return changed. Slowly removed from the schedule. Eventually erased by transfers, resignations, unexplained absences. Where do they go? I whispered. Nia looked at me for a long time before answering. Somewhere under the store, she said. Or inside someone else's idea of who they are. That night I stayed late with her and one other employee, a nervous guy named Owen, to watch the cart. Rain sheeted across the windows. The parking lot was empty except for the cart under the dead lamp. The store behind us hummed with refrigeration and fluorescent light. A clock over the office door clicked toward 1:17. Owen was the one who broke first. "I'm not touching it," he muttered. "Good," Nia said. He laughed too quickly. "No, I don't even want to look at it. Why is it always full of things we don't stock?" No one answered. Then his phone buzzed. He stared at the screen, and his face drained of color. "What?" I asked. He held the phone up. A voice note, from his own number. He pressed play. At first there was only breathing. Then a voice, soft and intimate, spoke his full name in a tone I had heard before in other contexts. Careful, observant, almost loving. "Go to the cart," the voice said. "You know what happens if you don't." Owen looked up, glassy-eyed. He walked outside before either of us could stop him. I ran after him into the rain. By the time I reached the lot, he was already standing by the cart, one hand on the handle, his face blank as if he had forgotten why he was there. The cart's contents looked wrong in the streetlight. Uniform shirts, old badges, a bouquet of flowers tied with a black ribbon. One of those small, disposable keychain cameras clipped to the side. I shouted his name. He turned toward me, and for one awful second, his face was not his own. Not physically. Something in his expression had changed. A knowledge, a familiarity that did not belong there. Then he touched the handle. He disappeared, not vanished like smoke. Not some supernatural trick. He was there 1 second and absent the next, as if the world had simply stepped around him. The rain kept falling. The cart sat still. I did not remember moving until Nia grabbed my arm and pulled me back through the side entrance. In the office, her hands were shaking. "What is this?" I asked. She stared at the wall. Then she said, "A recruitment system." I turned to her. "What?" "The cart is a lure," she said. "The items inside are personalized. It gets people who are already isolated, already vulnerable. It offers them something familiar enough to make them reach. Then it takes them somewhere quiet for 60 minutes, long enough to rewrite what they think they know, long enough to seed a new identity, a new obedience." I felt cold all the way through. "Who's doing it?" She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the answer before she said it. "The manager," she said, "or whoever has been using that name." The office computer was still open when we got to it. There was an inbox full of empty emails, attached photos, stolen schedules, voice files. One by one, they showed employees outside in the parking lot touching the cart. Then later, inside the store, repeating instructions to other staff as if they had been there forever. There were fake profiles too, dozens, dating apps, local groups, job boards, all of them connecting the same names, collecting routines, mapping the lonely. I understood then what the cart really was. Not a supernatural thing, not a curse, a machine for making people pliable. It was bait, and the hour missing from their lives was enough time for someone to get them alone, drug them, scare them, record them, and return them with small edits sewn into the edges of memory. A phrase here, a name there, a new fear, a new dependency, enough to make them easier to steer, enough to make them come back willingly the next time. I wanted to be sick. Nia was already on the phone with police. When they arrived, the parking lot was empty except for the cart. Rain had slowed to a mist. The lot lights blurred above us. Sirens painted the glass red and blue. Officers searched the store, the office, the back hallway, the basement access behind the freezers. They found a hidden room behind a maintenance wall. Recorded voice files, buyer lists, employee profiles, burner phones, scripts, and Greg. He was alive, sedated, confused, sitting in a chair with his wrists tied in plastic bands, staring at the floor like he had aged 10 years in a night. The manager was gone, not vanished, escaped. They found his badge in a drawer downstairs, the name scratched away and replaced with another. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the cart, not even the hidden room. The fact that someone had been wearing a false identity so long it had become a structure. A whole system built around lonely people. Around the way isolation makes a person willing to accept almost any explanation, as long as it promises relief. Nia was gone by the next week. Left a note in my locker. "You were never meant to be one of them." I still do not know whether that was kindness or warning. Maybe both. I quit the store a month later. Now I live in a different apartment, farther from the main roads. The fridge still hums at night. The city still leaks light through the curtains. Rain still taps on the windows when I cannot sleep. But sometimes, when I pass a supermarket after dark, I see an abandoned cart under a lamp and feel my pulse rise before I understand why. I learned something from the cart. Not that people disappear. That is simple. People are changed first. A small suggestion, a borrowed phrase, a copied habit, a voice note sent at the right hour, a face online that feels safe because it already knows your silence. By the time you notice the shape of the trap has already learned your name. And the worst part is this. Sometimes what scares us most is not the thing that takes us. It is the part of us that reaches for it first. Story 9. The fluorescent lights buzzed above the registers, thin and relentless. Rain pressed against the windows in silver sheets, and the neon from the diner across the street smeared like oil over the wet asphalt. The streets smelled of cold asphalt, wet leather, and something faintly metallic. I was alone on the night shift, always alone. I had taken the job after moving cities, after the divorce, after the apartment had been silent for too long, and I realized I was talking to myself in the mirror. I was trying to rebuild, brick by brick, from the quiet wreckage of someone else's leaving. I was fragile. I was careful. I was tired. The first time I noticed it, I didn't think much of it. A man at the counter looked at me, just briefly, and his eyes, under the flicker of the lights, glimmered like silver lines, like barcodes pulsing on skin. I blinked. Maybe it was a trick of the light. I wiped the counter. The reflection stayed. Curiosity outweighed sense. I brought the scanner close, not for purchases, just in the air between us, and the device beeped. Name, debt, fear. I stepped back. The receipt printed a tiny slip. James L. $14,230, fear of being forgotten. I told myself it was malfunctioning. I told myself I had imagined the glow. I told myself anything but the truth. Someone or something was cataloging people, scanning them, reading them. Then he appeared. Elliot. He slid into the booth where the shadows pooled thickest. Dark hair, soft eyes, calm. He smiled the kind of smile that made you think of trust, and I wanted to believe it. I did. You're always here late, he said. Just a statement. Not a question. Not invasive. Yes, I said, and the words felt brittle. It's quieter. I like quiet, he said. You notice things in quiet. I laughed softly. That first night, I told myself it was normal to want someone who listened. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it, but the red flags came in soft shapes. He knew my routines. The exact time I took the long route home along wet alleyways. The brand of tea I kept in my apartment. The song I hummed when folding laundry. The mug I kept tucked in the corner of the cupboard. You always use that mug, he said once, watching my hands. I like that about you. I froze, not because it was intimate, but because no one should know. Not anyone. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he just noticed. Maybe he had a good memory. Then the barcodes began flickering again. Always the same people. Some ordinary, some frighteningly familiar. Some with debts I hadn't known existed. Others with fears too personal to explain. And one night I saw it. My eyes, in the reflection of the register. Pulsing silver lines under fluorescent light. I lifted the scanner. The beep was louder this time. Insistent. A slip printed. Mara, unknown debt, countdown. 3 hours, 21 minutes, and 17 seconds. I dropped the paper. The scanner buzzed again. My hands shook. My reflection flickered in the glass. I could feel the blood leaving my fingertips, my chest tightening. I wanted to believe it was a joke. A glitch. A trick of exhaustion. But I could not. Elliot returned that night. Sitting at the same booth. Eyes on me like he could read the panic beneath the panic. I see you found your own line, he said softly. I don't know what this is, I whispered. I can help, he said. Calm. Observant. Caring. I wanted to believe it. I told myself he could help. I had no choice but to want that. The next nights were worse. Emails appeared. Fake accounts. Voice notes. Photos taken without my knowledge. Metadata scrubbing perfect. The scanner readings matched every movement I made. Every drink I bought. Every bus I took. Every apartment light I flicked on or off. I began to notice the little things. Footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment that weren't mine. The kettle whistling when no one was home. Floor creaks that seemed to follow me. Phone buzzes from unknown numbers with fragments of my own voice. I checked my social media. New accounts, always following me. Always just one step ahead. Elliot, or the persona I had come to trust. New things I hadn't told anyone. You're careful, he said one night. But you're predictable. That's okay. I know you better than you think. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself he was just observant. I told myself I could handle it, until the scanner printed the countdown again. 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 52 seconds. I began recording everything. Camera angles at the apartment, check-ins, notes, anything I could track. But each night, the numbers moved. My name stayed. The countdown ticked. Then the cafe's registers glitched. Each barcode customer printed their private data. Names, debts, fears. And one slip dropped for me, Mara, countdown. 1 hour, 37 minutes, and 12 seconds. I realized I had been cataloged, observed, listed, scheduled. I started to panic. The break came when I followed Elliot after his shift. Not in person, on foot, on the wet streets. But the shadows seemed to shift, the neon refracted in puddles. Every turn I took, there he was, appearing effortlessly in front of me or vanishing. I retreated into the apartment, shaking, rain dripping from my coat. My phone buzzed. You cannot hide. Not from yourself. I went to the police. Screen captures, metadata, the scanner slips. They traced multiple IPs, multiple devices, multiple fake accounts. It was a campaign, an obsession, multiple victims across cities, constructed personas, burners, AI voice cloning, surveillance hidden in ordinary appliances. And Elliot had never existed. Not fully, only in the moments designed to lull me into comfort. A careful, manipulative observer masquerading as empathy. The confrontation was silent. He, or they, were arrested in a sparse apartment stacked with phones, laptops, and hundreds of printed barcode slips. Each slip contained someone's private life, their weaknesses, their fears, their debts. My slip was there, folded neatly in a small pile, counting down still. I survived, but I was not the same. Now I work mornings. My apartment is fortified. Accounts scrubbed. Cameras off. Burner numbers deleted. But sometimes at the edge of sleep, I see the barcode in reflections. In strangers' eyes. In the mirror. I realize something. Obsession is quiet. Empathy is a tool. Trust is a transaction. And identity can be cataloged, mirrored, and scheduled long before we even realize it. Every barcode carries a story, and sometimes that story is yours. I learned the hard way. Survival is not enough, and privacy is a fragile, fading illusion. Story 10. The store looked different after midnight. Not bigger, just lonelier. The fluorescent lights flattened everything into pale colors, and the windows turned into black mirrors that reflected the aisles behind me. Outside, rain slid down the glass in thin silver lines, and the neon from the gas station across the street bled through the wet pavement in bruised reds and blues. The coffee machine hummed. The ice dispenser rattled. Somewhere in the back, a refrigerator kicked on with a tired metallic groan. I had taken the night shift because I needed silence. That was the first mistake. I had just come out of a breakup that had hollowed me out in slow pieces. Nothing dramatic. No shouting matches. No smashed dishes. Just months of being told I was too tense, too sensitive, too much work to love. The kind of cruelty that leaves no bruise and still changes the shape of your life. Afterward, I moved into a tiny apartment above a laundromat and took the overnight job at a convenience store because the hours were empty enough to think in. Or more honestly, empty enough to stop thinking. The store sat on the edge of a city road where the traffic thinned after 11. We sold cigarettes, lottery tickets, instant noodles, cold coffee, umbrellas, painkillers, and the usual late-night things people bought while trying not to fall apart. There was a public address system bolted into the ceiling, old and cheap, used mostly for paging the manager or announcing when a spill had to be cleaned. On my third week, it started speaking on its own. At first I thought it was a glitch. A burst of static cracked through the ceiling speakers while I was stocking bottled water. Then a voice came through. Not loud, not theatrical, just calm enough to make my stomach tighten. Customer at register 2 still checks the bathroom lock twice before sleeping. I stood still with a case of water in my arms. The store was empty. The voice went on, soft and flat, like a person reading from a file. Afraid of footsteps in hallways. Afraid someone knows the old name. I could feel the blood leave my face. The PA clicked off. The only sound left was the hum of the refrigerators and my own breathing. I told myself it had to be a prank, a broken system, maybe a radio bleed from somewhere else. Maybe I had imagined the words because I was tired and too jumpy. Maybe I was overthinking. I kept that version of the story for almost 2 days. Then the PA spoke again. This time a customer was in the store, a man in a gray hoodie buying energy drinks and cough drops at 1:17 a.m. He looked like every other exhausted man in the city. I scanned his items, and the register beeped softly in the quiet. The PA crackled. "Sir in the gray hoodie, you deleted the messages but kept the screenshots." The man went still. He turned his head slowly toward the ceiling speaker, his face drained of color. Then the voice continued. "You still haven't told her about the hotel room." He dropped the cough drops. They hit the tile and rolled under the lottery stand. I stared at him. He stared at me. Neither of us moved. Then he left without the energy drinks. When the door shut behind him, the store felt smaller. I checked the PA panel behind the counter. The wires looked fine. The power indicator was on. I cut the system at the breaker in the back hall. The speakers died for about 15 minutes. Then in the silence, I heard a faint breath from the speaker above aisle 3. Not electricity, breathing. I froze. A second later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. A voice note. I did not want to open it. I did anyway. My own voice came out of the speaker, shaky and low, like I was recording from inside a closet. "Please stop calling me that." My hands went numb. I had not recorded anything like that. I listened again. It sounded like me. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to make the back of my throat close. I called the district manager the next morning. He was the kind of man who wore concern like a cheap tie. He told me the PA system had probably been hacked. "Everybody thinks everything is haunted these days," he said, half joking. "We'll send somebody." They sent someone 2 days later. Her name was Mina. She was the new assistant manager from the next district over, sent to help because our store had temporary technical issues. She was around my age, with sharp eyes, a calm voice, and the kind of tired expression that made me trust her before I meant to. She noticed everything without making it feel like surveillance. "You look like you haven't slept properly in a while," she said on her first shift. I gave a short laugh. "That obvious? Only to people who've done it too." She brought me coffee from the cafe next door, without asking what I wanted. Small cup, black, no sugar. Exactly how I drank it when I was too tired to pretend I liked anything sweeter. I looked at it. "How did you know?" She shrugged. "You leave the same cup on the counter every night." I just paid attention. That should have been harmless. Comforting even. I wanted to believe her. Mina stayed late the first 3 nights, sitting near the lottery machine while I ran the register. We talked in the dull intervals between customers. About bad apartments, bad bosses, the way cities made people feel invisible and watched at the same time. She had a quiet way of speaking that made my shoulders drop. Then she mentioned my old band t-shirt, the one I wore under my work vest. "That's from your ex's favorite album," she said, almost casually. "You wore it when you came in here crying on your break last week." I stared at her. I did not come in crying. She held my gaze for a second too long. Maybe not visibly. I laughed once because I didn't know what else to do. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she was just observant. But then she said, "You still sleep with the light on in the bathroom because the hallway mirror reminds you of your mother's house." I stopped breathing. No one here knew that. No one should have known that. Mina's face changed just slightly when she saw my expression. Not surprise, recognition, like she had been waiting to see whether I would notice. The PA crackled before either of us could speak. "Worker at the front counter. The call from the hospital was not about her." Mina went pale. Then the voice added, almost gently, "It was about you." The customer in aisle 4 dropped a carton of milk. It burst on the floor. He backed away from the freezer section with wide eyes, like he had heard something private too. This was the strange part. It did not only feel targeted at me, it started to feel targeted at everyone. The PA announced to a teenager buying chips that his mother had found the hidden account. It told a woman in scrubs that the man who texted her was still using the old number. It told a delivery driver that his real fear wasn't dead. It was being recognized. Each time people froze. Each time their faces changed. Some fled. Some argued. Some stood in the middle of the aisle with their mouths half open, like the voice had reached into a place they had never shown anyone. By the end of the week, the store had become a rumor. Customers whispered that we were running some kind of loyalty scam, a local prank, a cult, a setup. I did not know what to believe, but I knew what fear sounds like when it is trying not to be heard. It sounds like breathing through the nose, like a bag rustling too fast, like the soft click of a phone turning face down on a counter. And all the while, the PA kept learning us. Mina and I pulled the ceiling panels open after midnight and found nothing but dust, wiring, and old insulation. We unplugged the speaker box. The voice came through the breaker cabinet in the back. We cut that power too. Then it came from the store phone. Then my phone. Then Mina's. At 2:04 a.m., a voice note arrived in my inbox from an account with no name. It was 10 seconds long. I pressed play with shaking fingers. My own voice said, "You still think you left him, don't you?" I stared at the phone so hard my eyes hurt. Mina took it from me. Her face was tight. "Who's him?" I asked. She did not answer right away. Then she said, "I think someone's been inside the system for a long time." That word landed badly. System. Not just the PA. Not just the store. She meant the cameras, the scheduling app, the inventory software, the cloud backups, the employee group chat, the loyalty account logs. All the places where our lives became little clean data points. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I opened the staff portal and saw my own profile edited. New emergency contact. New password reset. Old address attached to a phone number I did not recognize. When I clicked through the metadata, my hands began to shake. The changes had been made from inside the manager's account. Not Mina's. The district manager's. An hour later, he called. His voice sounded brittle, too controlled. "You need to keep the store open tonight," he said. "Why?" "Because if you shut it down, you'll lose the evidence." I looked at Mina. She was already staring at me like she had heard enough to understand the shape of the problem. We waited until after midnight. Then the front doors locked themselves. That was not the kind of thing that should happen automatically. The system had never done that before. The keypad flashed green, then red, then went dark. A second later, the PA crackled overhead. The voice said my name, not the one on my ID, the old one, the one only one person had used with any authority. I felt my stomach drop. Mina whispered, "Do not answer it," but I had already turned toward the ceiling. The voice continued, calm and almost tender. "You always listen when I say your name like that." My mouth went dry. The district manager had gone silent on the phone. I could hear him breathing. Then a distant sound, paper shuffling maybe, or panic. Mina was pale now. "Is that him?" I looked at her. Then I understood. Not the whole thing. Not yet. But enough. Mina wasn't just helping me because she was kind. She had been here before. She had seen the pattern. She had been told to watch me. I stepped back from the counter. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Her voice turned very careful. I didn't want to say it until I knew. He changes accounts, faces, jobs, names. He finds people who already think no one believes them. The PA clicked. A new voice came through. Not mine, not the broken copied one. A man's voice, warm, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "Still saying the same things," he said. "Still making everyone else sound crazy." I could hear traffic outside, rain on glass. Somewhere, a car alarm chirped and stopped. Mina reached into her jacket and pulled out a small recorder. "Police already have a file on this," she said. "I kept copies. He's done it in 4 stores, 3 pharmacies, 2 apartment buildings. He uses the PA, the cameras, the private chat logs. He learns what people are ashamed of and feeds it back to them until they stop trusting their own memory. The voice in the speaker cut in again. "I'm disappointed, Lena." I flinched at the name. Then I understood why customers had been reacting. Why some of them looked sick. Why some of them cried. Why one teenager had left shaking with a rash of red spots under his eyes like a panic attack had hit him in the middle of aisle 3. He wasn't just exposing secrets. He was identifying people by their fear and using the store to confirm it. He wanted each of us isolated before he moved closer. That was when I saw him on the monitor. Not in the store. Outside, under the awning, just beyond the neon spill from the sign, standing in the rain with his hands in his coat pockets and his face half hidden by the hood. He looked ordinary. That is what terrified me most. Ordinary men are always the hardest to spot when they want to be invisible. Mina swore under her breath and reached for the panic button under the counter, but he had already cut that too. The screen flickered. The camera angle shifted. Then the PA spoke one last time. "Open the door." I did not move. He took one step closer to the glass. Rain ran down his hood in thin threads. Then the voice over the speaker said in a lower tone, "You don't have to be afraid of me. You just have to stop pretending you're not alone." That sentence hit too close. My ex had said almost the same thing once. Not those exact words. Something cleaner. More patient. More poisonous. I realized then that this man had not learned me from the store. He had found me earlier, through old emails, deleted photos, a fake profile that had liked my breakup post and never commented, a burner number that had texted me once last year and vanished when I blocked it. Little touches, small enough to ignore. A campaign, a long one. Mina was already dialing 911 when the front door alarm finally screamed. Not because he forced it, because he stepped inside. The lights went out. For 1 second, the store was nothing but rain light, emergency red, and the white glow of the coolers. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, coming down aisle 2. I grabbed the metal baton from under the counter and moved toward the sound. My breathing was too loud in my own ears. The refrigerators hummed like they were trying to hold the room together. Mina shouted my name from somewhere behind me. I could not see her. I could only hear the static on the PA and his shoes on the tile. Then a flashlight beam swept across my face. Police. 2 officers entered through the side door, guns low but ready, and the man in the hood froze for the first time. Not scared, cornered. He had the expression of someone whose plan has finally met the shape of a real world. He looked at me once, then at Mina, then at the ceiling speaker, and smiled. That smile is what I remember most. Not because it was cruel, because it was familiar, as if he had always expected us to understand him. The officers took him down in the middle of aisle 3. The PA kept playing static. Then a voice cut through again, faint and distorted, as if it had been waiting for the right second. "Lena," it said, "you never did like being watched." Police found the equipment in the back office. Signal splitters, microphones, a relay box hidden in the maintenance wall, a cloned login tied to half a dozen stores under different chain names, a folder on his laptop with screenshots of employees, customers, schedules, social media profiles, old addresses, and private notes copied from cloud backups. He had used the store systems to build a map of people who already doubted themselves. He was not a ghost, not a curse, not anything mysterious enough to be comforting. Just a man who had made surveillance feel like intimacy. The police asked if I knew him. "Not really," I said. That was true in the smallest and worst possible way. He knew the old name. He knew the breakup, the apartment, the bathroom light, the mirror in the hallway. He knew enough to make me feel seen before I realized I was being studied. After the arrest, the store stayed closed for a week. The PA system was ripped out and replaced. The district manager resigned. Mina transferred to a different location and left me her number, written on the back of a receipt. "You're not imagining things anymore," she told me on our last shift together. That's not the same as being safe, but it's a start. I laughed a little when she said it. Then I almost cried. The store reopened under new management. The first night back, the silence felt too large. The aisles were too clean. The ceiling was too still. The absence of the voice made the place feel almost worse, because I had learned how to listen for danger, and now there was nothing to listen to except my own breathing. I still work nights. I still hear the hum of the refrigerators, the distant sirens, the rain tapping the windows when the weather turns. I still check locks twice. I still flinch when my phone buzzes after midnight. But I no longer mistake attention for care. I no longer think that knowing me means loving me. And I know now that privacy is not a luxury. It is not a preference. It is the thin, necessary boundary that lets a person remain themselves in a world that is always trying to translate them into something useful. The loudest danger is not always the one that shouts. Sometimes it speaks softly through a ceiling speaker. Sometimes it uses your own voice. And sometimes the most terrifying thing is not that it knows your secrets. It is that it learns them just well enough to make you doubt you ever owned them in the first place.